Do you find it difficult to live for the Lord in a culture that's spiritually bankrupt?
Today, in continuing with our Unsung Heroes series, we're going to be talking about Deborah, who is a pivotal character in Scripture. That's what we're going to be discussing today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee.
Hello, welcome to Christ, Culture, and Coffee. I'm your host, Robbie Lashow, and I'm here with my awesome, amazing co-host, Tyler Hurley.
Thank you. I
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate it.
I noticed you're wearing your GCU sweatshirt
I am.
today, representing.
Last week you were wearing your Biola hoodie, so I thought, I can represent my school too. If
That's
I want
nice.
To.
That's
cool.
good.
Yeah.
That's
like,
perfectly
here we go.
acceptable. Yeah, here we go.
go.
Anyway, hey, we're glad you're here with us today on Christ, Culture, and Coffee. Really excited to continue in our Unsung Heroes series, talking about Deborah, the judge. This is going to be awesome. So many people, again, don't know a lot about Deborah, and there are some beautiful things that we can glean from her life and apply to ours when it comes to apologetics, and it comes to evangelism, and it comes for living for the Lord in a spiritually dead society.
Yeah, and I think this is fitting for it to be a part of our Unsung Heroes series here because a lot of the events that take place in Judges, people are kind of unfamiliar with, which is interesting because it's a very fascinating book in the Old Testament. And,
yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and then just the character of who Deborah is really, I think, a pivotal example of how we should be representing the Lord in our culture and being strong and standing up for our faith. And so Deborah really is just a great example of someone to replicate, basically, based off of her example that she left. And so we're just super excited to get into the details of this content for this week. But before we get into that, we just wanted to give a few announcements really quick. Number one, if you're not following us on YouTube already, go ahead and get on there because, we have regular videos that are coming out, more content coming your way soon, constantly uploading stuff onto there. So be on the lookout for that. And then also follow us on our social media account pages on Instagram, Facebook, and then Christ, Culture, and Coffee Insiders.
Yeah. I was encouraged this week on the Insiders. We got some new people that left us a review on iTunes, and so then we let them be an insider. And I want to give a shout out to our guy Luis. He was telling us, hey, thanks for letting me be a part of this. I love the detailed information in your podcast. And so I said, yeah, hey, thanks for listening, And he said, thank you guys for an amazing podcast. I started listening a couple weeks ago, starting from podcast number 1. I'm listening to number 79 now, and I hope to catch up with all of them soon. Yeah. It's been an incredible help for me. So, hey, Luis, we're so glad, man, that you're listening and that this has been a help. That's the whole purpose, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We want to equip Christians to be confident in their faith and to be able to share their faith with those around them. So that is what we want to be about. So if you're not an insider, go ahead and ask to be an insider on our Facebook group. We would love for you to join. Again, subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on Instagram. We post a ton of stuff on there. Actually, we just posted our first Instagram TV video.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to be doing more of that. So a lot of cool stuff coming in the future. So make sure you get connected. And we love to hear feedback. We love to hear what God's doing in your life. And so if you've got any tips for us or questions, we love answering them on there.
Yeah, and also be on the lookout on our Instagram pages because what's pretty cool is with our posts that we're coming out with now, we've been starting to try out these new quick reference posts, which what you can do is Instagram has a feature where you can bookmark a post. And something that's really cool about that is when you bookmark this post, these type of posts that we're coming out with, they're meant to be a quick reference to an apologetics tactic. Yeah. So we have ones out there right now for engaging with people with truth, talking about objective truth versus subjective truth. And then there's another one out there about text criticism and the reliability of Scripture. And what you can do is whenever we have one of these posts, you'll see at the end, there'll be a suggestion to bookmark it, because what you can do is you can go later to your Instagram profile on posts that you've bookmarked and say that you're getting in a conversation with a Mormon, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh, everything I've learned has kind of just left my mind right now.
Yeah,
Like,
or
I don't remember.
even like references in the Book
yeah.
of Mormon. It's hard to remember all the chapters and verses.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is we want to come out with posts that are like quick references describing tactics on witnessing to Mormons on Instagram. And what you can do is you can bookmark that, go back onto your profile's bookmark posts later, and then you can use that quick reference just in case you end up being in a point where you aren't in the middle of a conversation and you're not remembering some of the quick reference tips that we've given. So that way you have that as a resource. So make sure that you're keeping out on the lookout for that, because we want you to be able to have the resources available to you to be able to defend your faith and be confident in your faith.
Yeah, it's such a quick resource, and you have your phone all the time, and Instagram's really accessible. So that's a great way to do it. Yep. So make sure you join us on all of our platforms, because we want to help you be equipped and know how to share your faith with people. Hey, I did want to give a shout out to my friend Daniel. He listens and watches the show regularly, and he actually is fueling this episode.
That's true.
With our coffee. He gave me at church this last weekend. He gave me a pound of this Ethiopian coffee from Village Coffee Roastery in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it is amazing. Like, I'm loving this. So Daniel, hey, thanks so much, bro, for this great coffee. Now, if any of you out there want to send us a pound of coffee, we're up for it.
We'll give you a shout out if that's all it takes.
We will definitely give you a shout out. Yeah. So keep that in mind. We love coffee. So anyway, hey, before we dive into the topic, we do want to point out our sign here by our friend Matthew.
Yeah. And so what's super cool about this sign is our friend Matthew, he designed a custom wood and metal sign that is perfect for our podcast, and he can do things like this for you too at home. Go on his Instagram account. You can look at some of the things that he's done at SE Collective, and that's collective without an E, SE Collective. And he has tons of cool projects. Make sure you go and check him out.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll put all of his stuff in the show notes as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, hey, let's get into it.
Yeah, this is super exciting.
Deborah, the judge. So a little background on the book of Judges. So if you read it, you will notice a pattern or a cycle that continues to happen throughout the book. And basically the cycle goes like this. Israel falls into idolatry and sin. And then they get enslaved by a foreign country or a foreign people. Then they say, "Where are you, God? We really need your help." Yeah. God raises up a judge. The judge delivers Israel from the foreign people. And then Israel serves the Lord. And then they repeat again. Then they fall into idolatry.
It repeats the whole thing.
They get enslaved, and they cry out. God raises up a judge, and then they serve the Lord. And then they fall into idolatry. You see this cycle happen over and over and over again. So just as a little bit of a snapshot to it, you see Mesopotamia comes and they take over Israel for 8 years, right? And Othniel, he's the judge. And then he delivers them, and they have a good 40 years. Mm-hmm. And then you see Ehud gets raised up as a judge because the Moabites have taken over Israel for 18 years. And he comes and delivers them, and then they have 80 years of serving the Lord. And then they fall into idolatry again.
Right.
And then Canaan takes them over for 20 years. And then God raises up Deborah, who we're going to talk about today. And then Midian takes them over, and God raises up Gideon. And then Ammon takes them over, and God raises up Jephthah. And then the Philistines take them over, and God raises up Samson. And so this is the cycle of the judges, okay? So just to know what's going on here. And if you look at the beginning of each section of the stories about this cycle, they all begin with the same phrase. And the phrase is this: the sons of Israel, again, did evil in the sight of the Lord. That's going back to the cycle, right? That's the beginning. So that's where we're at with Deborah. So she is the third judge in the book of Judges, all right? And her foe are the Canaanites. Those are the people who've come in and they've taken over Israel and put them into bondage. All right, so let's dig in.
Yeah, this is
ready?
Exciting. Let's do it.
All right, so Judges 4, 1 through 5. You want to read that, Tyler?
Yeah, of course. So in this passage it says, "Then the sons of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord." There's that phrase.
There's the phrase, yep.
"And after Ehud died, and the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, the king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor, and the commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Haroseth Haglium.
Yeah,
Is
I don't
that
know how to
correct?
say that.
That's
Harosheth, Hagoyim,
Heroes-Deborah.
maybe.
I think
Yeah.
it's Heroes-Deborah. That's right.
Yeah.
And the sons of Israel cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed the sons of Israel severely for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lipidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the sons of Israel came up to her for judgment.
All right. So
Okay.
here's the picture, right? Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord. Jabin, the king of Canaan, starts to take over. He's reigning from the Canaanite city of Hazor, and for 20 years, he's oppressing Israel. And the method of his oppression is he has a superior technology.
Yeah,
Iron
that's right.
chariots.
That's
all
right. And so this is super intimidating.
Yeah, this
'cause-
is the best warfare that you could have at the time were iron chariots.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Israel doesn't have that.
So it's powerful. It's like, and so obviously they're looking at this, seeing, and I said 900 iron chariots.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can move faster, you can kill a
Yeah.
lot of people, you can evade attacks easier. So this is how they were winning. And for 20 years, they're oppressing Israel. And then there's this lady named Deborah. Now,
Right.
what do we know about her from this passage? Well, there's two things that identify her. One, she's a prophetess. She prophesies.
right, yeah.
And number two, she's a judge that God's raised up.
Right, we see that in this passage. And so it's interesting, though, because Deborah is unique because the only other judge who is also said to be a prophet is Samuel.
Yeah.
So that's something that's kind of special about Deborah.
Yeah, she's very special because you think about like Gideon, he didn't prophesy.
Right, yeah.
You think about Samson, he didn't prophesy. Deborah, prophet and judge, right? And the only other one, like you said, that had both of those offices or those abilities was Samuel, right?
Right,
So it's really interesting to think about who she is and what she did. Now, she's the only female judge as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
And this is important to think about. The time of the judges it's about this 300-year time span after Joshua goes into the land and conquers, before they set up Saul as king. All right, there's this 300-ish year period of the judges, and it was really because of the cycle. They kept falling into idolatry, and then they'd get redeemed by the Lord and fall into idolatry, like we said. So it was kind of a discouraging time in Israel's history. They weren't really following the Lord solid for any period of time, right?
Right,
They kept going back and forth and back and forth. And you think about Deborah at this time, the question I always ask is, well, where were the godly men that could have been a judge at this time?
Yeah,
There weren't.
right.
I think that's fascinating. There weren't. And so she is like a real amazing woman in the sense that because her culture was so depraved when she started being a judge and people had turned away from the Lord, she didn't let that affect her. She continued to do what God called her to do in spite of the cultural malaise, the spiritual depravity that was all around her.
Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the reasons why we're saying that she just was quite the biblical character to look at and see by her example. Because the thing is, despite her cultural opposition, she persevered through that, and she stood
did.
up for the faith. And so and she lived up to her calling as a judge.
Yeah.
And we can see that throughout this this episode as we're going to be diving in deeper.
Yeah,
But-
she did some amazing things. I mean, even going into battle, she was a real warrior for the Lord. It's fascinating to me. And there is like this, how do I want to say it? There's this aspect to reality where women are more spiritual than men.
It's true.
There just are. More women attend church in America than men.
Yeah.
Right? You look at most youth groups, you will have more girl students there than you have boy students.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. It's kind of cool to see that there's like this. There is a difference between the way that men and women interact in their faith.
Yeah.
And seeing the example that Deborah left, and like that she is being. Like she's not lacking in her heart for the Lord and her spirit, spirituality that she's investing in with her faith here, and you can see that. And just like you said, Robbie, like women just seem to be more in tune with their faith, and it's just the case. And it's not that men aren't, but it's like you just see that women have like this emotional connection with God.
It's different.
More often than
And
it
she
is.
and she, this is what I think is awesome, and I can't overemphasize this. She didn't let the lack of godly men in her culture keep her from doing what God wanted her to do.
Yeah, that's right.
Sometimes people will bemoan that or complain about where are all the other people. You know, you think of Elijah, right? Where's everybody?
Yeah,
He's around the
that's
only
right.
one.
That's
She's
right.
like, I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do regardless of it, right? Now, we also see in this passage that she was filled with a passion for the Lord to kind of ignite the lethargic hearts of the Israelites. And this is where we see that. You know how when we were reading, it said that she was the wife of Lapidoth, right? The wife of Lapidoth. Probably a bad translation.
Yeah, that's right.
And this is why. The word for wife in Hebrew is Aisha, all right? Now, it's the same word as woman or female, all right? So we in English, we have a different word for wife and female. In Hebrew, it's Aisha.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
contextually, you have to ask the question, is it talking about a wife or is it just saying she's a woman? Right? Interesting question.
Yeah, because the passage, it says in the one I just read, Deborah, prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, if I'm saying his name correctly.
This is where we get an interesting tidbit of what this is saying, because the word Lapidoth, lapid, it means torch in Hebrew.
That's right.
Fire, right?
Yeah.
So the better translation of this is probably to say Deborah, a woman of the torch. A woman of the fire, this idea that she had a fiery spirit that God was going to use. She was a passionate person that would ignite revival in Israel, versus saying who she was married to.
And because the thing is, you look at the rest of her story and you see that definition makes sense.
Yeah.
It does, because the thing is, you see, again, we're getting into it more and more, but like she definitely had that torch for the faith.
Well, and Lapid is a weird name for a person to have.
It really is.
It's not really what they'd name their kids after. They usually name after God or other situations, but so it probably means Deborah, the woman of the torch, which is kind of a cool moniker.
Yeah.
Last week we talked about Barnabas.
I was going to say nicknames.
Nickname.
That's what I was thinking. It's like, you hear nicknames like Barnabas being the son of encouragement, and then like there's tons of crazy nicknames in the Bible. Like
there are.
Like, I mean, who was nicknamed the duo that was nicknamed Sons of Thunder?
Oh, James and John.
James and John.
Yeah,
like, what a cool nickname is that?
Well, yeah, maybe.
Like,
I mean, I always wonder if it's cool because they were like tough guys, or were they just really loud?
That could be. You never know.
Or was their mom really annoying?
Right.
And so it's like your Sons of Thunder.
I mean, but just thinking of a nickname like that, I mean, that sounds like
it is kind of cool.
That sounds like an NBA duo nickname, like Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are the Splash Brothers.
Splash
so
Brothers,
like
the Thunder Brothers.
The Brothers of Thunder. I don't know, but either way, having a cool nickname like this, being the woman of the torch, that's significant.
It is
right?
significant. Yeah. So she's a prophetess. She's a judge. She's the woman of the torch.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So the enemy of Israel during her time was Canaan, right? But specifically, it mentions this king named Jabin, Jabin, right?
Yeah.
The king of Canaan. So who is this guy? This is fascinating, I think, to get into the history of what was going on in the area. So we're going to take it from the time of Deborah back to when Joshua was bringing the Israelites into the land, and they were going around and they were conquering all the cities of Canaan. This is what Joshua 11:1 says, and then 11:9 through 13. So it says, "Then it came about when Jabin, the king of Hazor, heard of it, that he sent to Jobab, king of Madon, and to the king of Shimron, and to the king of Akshaph." And then verse 9 of Joshua 11. "Joshua did to them as the Lord had told him. He hamstrung their horses, and he burned their chariots with fire. Then Joshua turned back at that time and captured Hazor and struck its king with the sword." So that means Jabin was killed with the sword, right? "For Hazor formerly was the head of all these kingdoms. They struck every person who was in it with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying them. There was no one left who breathed, and he burned Hazor with fire. Joshua captured all the cities of these kings and all of their kings, and he struck them with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed them, just as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. However, Israel did not burn any cities that stood on their mounds except Hazor alone, which Joshua burned." Okay, now you go back to Deborah's situation, and there's this king named Jabin who's ruling from Hazor over the Canaanites. Wait a second. Didn't that guy just get killed? Didn't Joshua kill him a while back?
That's what it would appear to be.
And he burned Hazor to the ground. It's the only city he completely burns to the ground in this passage. So what's going on? This is interesting. the Jabin of the time of Deborah can't possibly be the same Jabin of the time of Joshua. There's too much time passed, and that Jabin got killed by Joshua.
Yeah, he's dead.
So what do we see going on? Well, a couple of things. This guy in Deborah's time is trying to resurrect the greatness of the Canaanite kingdoms. Mm-hmm. He rebuilds the city of Hazor, the capital city that was ruling over all the Canaanite cities, and he names himself Jabin after the last great Canaanite king.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, it makes sense because what you're thinking is at the time they're trying to build a name for themselves and making it seem as though their culture and who they are is they basically worshiping the king like by renaming himself after one that died long ago. It's kind of like their way of saying, no, he's not dead. He's eternal because he's a god essentially. Like this is a big deal.
Or at least we're going back to who we were. We're
That's
looking back to the good old days.
Like this is
the good old days before Israel came in here and messed it all up.
Right. Yeah.
So they don't like Israel. This is why they're oppressing them. Like Joshua came in and you ruined their kingdom.
Yeah, I know that they're horrible people, but I don't think anyone would like you if you went and burned their city.
No, no. So this is a revenge. This is we're reestablishing, we're regrouping, and we're going to rebuild, and we are going to come and reconquer our land. Yeah. That's what's going on in the time of Deborah. So Jabin, who named himself after a previous Canaanite king, rebuilds the previous capital of the Canaanite empire.
Yeah, that's right.
And did you notice in that Joshua passage, it says Joshua burnt all their chariots.
Yeah, I did
Now
see that.
we know this guy's got 900 iron chariots ready to go. Mm-hmm. They have regrouped and they're ready to take back their land. So this is a tough situation to be in.
It is.
And no wonder he's oppressing the Israelites. It makes a lot of sense, right? He hates the Israelites. So that's what's going on in the situation in Deborah's time. This is what she has to deal with. Now, another thing we see is that Deborah would go out by the tree of Deborah.
Right.
And people would come and let her judge, let her decide disputes.
Yeah, this was publicly known. She didn't keep herself in hiding or like in secret. She was out in the open. She made herself accessible, and people knew, like, hey, you want to go talk to Deborah, the prophetess, the judge, go see her. We can tell you exactly where she's at.
I think this is interesting for us as apologists and evangelists is we need to be accessible to people.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? We can't hide behind microphones or hide in our church buildings. We have to be out and accessible to others who have questions, which means they have to know who we are and what we stand for. We can't be secret agent anonymous Christians. People need to know we're believers, but we don't have to be jerks about it. But we have to be accessible to people who have questions, who want to come to us and ask us about the faith that we have. Yeah. And I think in our celebrity culture, it seems like the goal is to be so in demand that you can hide out from everybody, which is like completely not how Jesus lived his life. He was out in public. Now, there were times where he'd say, I need to spend time in prayer and get away from it all. But he was out in public. He wasn't hiding in a synagogue or in a temple. Yeah. Only accessible once a week or something like that, right? And I think that's a good point for us to learn from Deborah. How accessible are you to your neighbors? How accessible are you to your baristas? How accessible are you to the people who work with you to talk about important things? Because Deborah was.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And so when you look at her example again, you just see someone who you want to be more like. And Robbie gave a perfect example of how we can apply this practically today. Mm-hmm. How are you making yourself more accessible to people? How are you being more open in public with your faith and your help towards other people? Yeah. That's something that Deborah was about. She, like you said, she wasn't wanting to just hide in the shadows. And so that's something that I think is very important based off of her character too. It just shows who she is, right? Yeah. It shows that she's a woman of God who loves the Lord and she loves people.
Well, the crazy thing is too, if you think culturally at this time, Israel's not following the Lord. That's why they're being oppressed by the Canaanites.
Yes, right? That's right.
Mm-hmm. God's fulfilling his promise to, if you follow me, the promise he made at the Sinai Peninsula, the Sinai Covenant. If you guys follow me and obey me, I'll continue to bless you. Well, they weren't. And so he brings somebody to oppress them, to wake them up, to return to him, right? So think about this. during a spiritually dead, depraved, rough time where everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, not what's right in the Lord's eyes.
Right.
Deborah stands firm for Jesus, even though it's totally backwards to the culture she's in, right?
Yeah.
She's totally countercultural, and she lets people know where she stands and where she'll be. So I think sometimes as Christians, we want to just hide out and not make waves and not let people know. And sometimes we wimp out.
Yeah.
And she didn't do that.
That's true.
She was very strong in who she was and what God wanted her to do, even when the culture around her, with her fellow Israelites, wasn't good.
That's
And
right.
I love that about her.
And so just very counterculture, but in a good way. In a good way. That's the thing. And you know, like we said, like this woman, she's really a fantastic pivotal character.
She is. And we're going to get into talking about like what she did in battle and how she delivered Israel from the Canaanite king Jabin. Before we do that, though, I want to alert you and let you know again about our sign from our good friend Matthew. He made the sign for us. It's beautiful. We love it. And we want to direct you to all the things that he can do for you in making different signs, different furniture and stuff. And so I want to just have a word from our sponsor about him. And hey, I'm going to give you that word. From our sponsor. Here we go. So there's something special about handcrafted furniture and decor that adds warmth and quality to your home. Something factory-made furniture just can't compare with. SE Collective Design provides beautiful, custom-designed and built pieces within the greater Phoenix, Arizona area. Each creation is a work of art crafted just for you, using wood, metal, or unique combinations to truly meet any design needs. Everything from signs to dining tables, they have the tools and the know-how to create one-of-a-kind furnishings. For more information and to see some of their work, be sure to follow them on Instagram and Facebook or visit their website at secollective.com. SE Collective, custom, quality, affordable. And again, if you want to check them out, we'll put their website in the show notes. One caveat to their website, it's SE Collective, but there's no E on the end of collective.
Yes.
It ends with a V. secollective.com. So make sure you check them out. Give them some love. Give them some shout-outs about, hey, saw your sign on Christ Culture and Coffee. Really love it. And if you need something made, Matthew's your guy.
Yeah, he did a
ready
great
to
job
go.
on our sign, and we know that he'll do a good job for whatever project you need.
Yep, absolutely. All right, now getting back to Deborah. How does she, as a prophetess judge, deliver Israel from Jabin, the king of the Canaanites? Well, I'm glad you asked.
That's right.
So here we go. Let's read Judges 4, 6 through 16. Now, this is kind of a chunk of scripture, but this is like the main meat of Deborah's ministry. All right, I'm going to read that. Now, she sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, Behold, the Lord, the God of Israel, has commanded, Go and march to Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the sons of Naphtali and from the sons of Zebulun. I will draw out to you Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and with his many troops, to the river Kishon, and I will give him into your hand. Then Barak said to her, If you will go with me, then I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go. She said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you are about to take. For the Lord will sell Sisera into your hands, sell Sisera into the hands of a woman. When Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali together to Kadesh, and 10,000 men went up with him. Deborah also went with him. Now Heber the Kenite had separated himself from the Kenites, from the sons of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zanim, which is near Kadesh. Then they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Sisera called together all his chariots, 900 iron chariots, and all the people who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoim to the river Kishon. Deborah said to Barak, Arise, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Behold, the Lord has gone out before you. So Barak went down to Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. The Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army with the edge of the sword before Barak. And Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. But Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth-Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not even one was left.
Yeah.
Okay, what is going on here?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what happened? So Deborah knows God's going to go and fight for them.
Yes,
She tells
that's
Barak, hey, go get 10,000 dudes from these 2 different tribes, and they're going to come out and fight with you, right? And she prophesies. So, okay, Deborah, first of all, is a baller.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because she goes into battle with Barak.
Yeah,
This takes
that's right.
guts, right? Like, I wouldn't want to do that.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's really interesting to see like how bold she is in this passage. She's very upfront into going into battle, and
She is.
But the thing is, you see the way that she's speaking throughout this. She's confident. You see that through her. It's not like shaky. Like we might do this. It's like, no, this is going to happen. Like she's very like on task, like this is what will happen.
And she's prophesying. This is what God is going to do.
Yeah, and you know
right?
what? That's the thing. And because she's prophesying, and you see like her confidence in hearing back from this, you realize like God's really speaking to her about this, and it's cool. It's cool seeing this. And then not only that, we just see that her prophesying like it comes true.
It's true, and she's so confident in what she's prophesying. She knows it's from the Lord, so she's not fearful to go into battle.
Yeah, and that's
right.
really
So she's
important
like,
to know.
"All right, Brock, I'll go with you into battle." Right? She prophesies a real specific thing, though. She says, "But listen, the honor's not going to go to you, Barak.
Yes,
because Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, is going to be killed by a woman."
Yes, that's right. And
That's really specific. Like really specific. How many women do you think came from the 2 tribes that were in the 10,000 men?
Gosh,
0.
I was gonna say
Because they're called 10,000 men, and women.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, right?
And so it's like, how is this gonna happen?
There's no women on the battlefield other than Deborah. So maybe Barak thought, oh, she's going to kill him. Maybe she's referring to herself.
and it's like, oh, I'm prophesying that I myself am going to kill you. But no, that's
isn't
not
what she
that's not what
said.
she was saying. And so what's interesting about this, we see that that this is very specific and it's time sensitive. Because it's saying, no, it's going to happen. She says like that it's going to happen then. Like
he's going to be killed by a woman. So it's not vague. It's not like a Nostradamus. Remember when we talked about his vague prophecies that you can make fit all these situations?
Yes. If you're not familiar with that, over Christmas we did a series on prophecy. In our first episode, we talked about a false prophet, Nostradamus, right? And so it's like it's not like his prophecies where they were vague and didn't make any sense. This was specific. It was meant for like the specific time frame and like specific person who would come through and do it. And so it's like and not extremely specific, but it did say a woman, right?
Yeah,
and that's
he's going to be
significant.
delivered into her hand. It's very significant, and it's really significant when you bring in again Deuteronomy 18, which talks about a prophet who's from the Lord. What they say comes from the Lord. It will happen, and if it doesn't happen, they're not a real prophet. You should kill them, and you don't need to be afraid of them.
That's right, and that's something that should be applied to every prophet.
Yeah,
not just like biblical characters, but anyone who tries to make a prophecy in the name of the Lord. You need to follow this prophet test.
If what they say doesn't come true, they're not a prophet.
Yeah, then they're not a real prophet. And
so she prophesies a woman is going to kill Sisera. She goes into battle with Barak. And then, I don't know if you noticed, Tyler, but in verse 11, there's this really weird, like, out-of-place verse, right? Because this is all talking about Deborah and Barak's conversation and what they were doing. Then in verse 11, it says, now Heber, the Kenite, had separated itself from the Kenites, from the sons of Hobad, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zanaim, which is near Kadesh. Who cares? What does it have to do with anything? Well, we're gonna learn what it has to do with something in a little while when we read the rest of the story.
Yes,
but
keep that in mind.
Yeah, who is this guy? Who are the Kenites? Right. Sometimes when I read the Old Testament, there's all these different people groups and tribes named, and you can just like gloss over and be like,
you can.
What is this?
And then naming this person the father-in-law of Moses, like what's going on?
Yeah,
right?
but when you dig in deep, you can see what is being said here, which I think is interesting. So Heber the Kenite, the father-in-law of Moses. Well, if you read in Exodus, isn't Jethro the father-in-law of Moses? Not Heber. That's interesting. Jethro, not Heber. Jethro is also sometimes called Reuel, but it's the same guy we know from Exodus.
Yeah.
Now, I want to read this passage from Exodus 18. I'm just going to read verse 29.
Yeah.
But 29 through 33 talks about this situation. This is from Numbers 10:29.
Yes.
And it says, Then Moses said to Hobab, the son of Reuel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law. In Judges, it says Heber was a relative of Hobab, who was the father-in-law of Moses. Here, it says Hobab was the son of Reuel or Jethro, who was Moses' father-in-law. So this passage identifies Hobab as Moses' brother-in-law,
Yes.
not his father-in-law.
Yeah, so what's going on here?
Well,
then is the
Judges
question.
says that Hobab was his father-in-law. So
Okay.
have we uncovered a mistake in the Bible? Have we uncovered the one thing that says this isn't inerrant, it's
This is
not
fake.
infallible,
It's a fake.
it's fake?
It's not real. It's not authentic.
Have we? No.
Well, thank you for listening to Christ Culture and Coffee. This is our last episode. Where
We uncovered the secret of Christianity. No. What's going on here? This is really interesting. In Hebrew, the word brother-in-law and father-in-law are the same word.
Interesting.
Interesting, right?
Okay.
They're the same word. There's not a distinction. So this is important for us because Hobab is identified as Moses' brother-in-law in Numbers. And then in Judges, it gets translated father-in-law, but it could be brother-in-law because it's the exact same word.
That's interesting.
So
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's just instead of father-in-law, it should have been translated brother-in-law because that's who Hobab
So
is.
it's the same word, but it's referring to a different. So he's his brother-in-law.
Yeah.
That's a difference.
Yeah. And so here's why this is important for the battle that Deborah was having with the Canaanites. This guy Heber is related to Moses' brother-in-law, going way back.
Right.
And what Moses did with that side of his family, because they're not Israelites.
That's right.
Remember, he married a girl from Midian. She was a Midianite. So Jethro's a Midianite. They're not Israelites. So they don't have a right to the Israelite land. Right, but they're married. There's an affiliation between
Yes,
them.
that's right.
So what happens is that the Midianites, the Kenites, lived on the border of Israel and Canaan, basically. And Moses makes a deal with them here in Numbers 10 to say, hey, listen, let's look out for each other. Let's help each other. And basically, you Kenites, be our eyes on the border.
Yeah.
And if something crazy goes down, you let us know what's going to happen. And they make a deal.
Yeah.
So now, fast forward to the time of Deborah. You have this guy, Heber, who's related to Moses' brother-in-law, who knows about this deal they made way back in the day. And he moves in a little from the border. Right. And so that's where he's located and his tent's located, all right? So he is going to operate as the eyes for Israel because he has an affiliation with the Israelites. What does that have to do with anything? Well, we need to keep reading, right?
Yes.
We need to keep reading.
Yes.
Couple of things here. God gives Israel the victory, right? We see that Deborah says, behold, the Lord is going before you.
Yes.
Go and attack. The Israelites come down from Mount Tabor to the 900 chariots, and they kill everybody. How is this possible? Because the Israelites didn't have chariots.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. 'Cause like we said, we mentioned earlier, this was a very big deal because with chariots, let alone like 900 of them, were very like technologically advanced for the day. Like that was considered like the strongest kind of thing that army had about them.
It was technological advancement.
It was because the thing is they were able to be protected in the chariots. They were getting around very fast.
Yep.
In them, and it's just like
it'd be really hard to beat 900 chariots when you're on foot with a sword. Like, how do you do that? So what happened here? Because a couple of things. In the passage we read from Judges, Deborah tells Barak, behold, the Lord has gone before you. Behold, we don't use it often, but it's saying, look. Check it out, dude. So they're up on a mountain and they're looking down at the Canaanites. And she says, look, God's going before you. What is she referring to? Right? And then in verse 15, it said, the Lord routed Sisera and his chariots. What did the Lord do to rout Sisera, the general, and the chariots? What exactly is going on? What's Barak seen that gives him the courage to say, all right, let's get him now?
Yes, and we find the answer to this from the Song of Deborah in chapter 5 of Judges, where she explains what's going on.
Yep. Do you want to read a couple of those passages?
Yeah, of course.
This is beautiful. So she's glorifying God for what he did, and it gives us insight into what she's referring to, God routing Sisera.
Yeah. And so, and again, this is in chapter 5 of Judges, and this I'm just going to first read verses 4 and 5. It says, Lord, when you went out from Seir, if I say that properly, when you marched from the field of Edom, the earth quaked, the heavens also dripped, even the clouds dripped water. The mountains quaked at the presence of the Lord, this Sinai at the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. And so basically what she's saying in these first two verses, it's raining.
Yeah, there was an earthquake and there's rain.
Yeah, so
okay,
that's a big deal.
So let's read the next. Yeah, read the next couple of verses.
Yeah, and so this is skip down a little further, verses 21, 22. It says, the stars fought from heaven, from their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon, O my soul, march on with strength. Then the horses' hoofs beat. Right? So this is what's interesting is seeing, and then with this, we also see, it says, from the dashing of the horses' hooves, it says, from the dashing of his valiant steeds, right? Yeah. So they're saying that basically what's happening is, it rains, and then there's earthquakes, and then the horses' hooves are beating against the ground. So So what's going on here?
Well, a couple of things. So they're by this river Kishon, and she talks about the torrent of Kishon, right?
Yes.
And then rain, and then earthquake, and then it even says the stars begin to fight, right? The stars fought from heaven. So are there like some asteroid type things happening? Possibly, right?
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is, have you ever tried to drive an iron chariot in the mud?
I mean, I haven't personally.
Me neither,
I don't know about you.
You know how hard that would be? Chariots are only good when the ground is dry.
Yes, and most of you might not know that. And in fact,
sure,
I mean, before today, I didn't really think about that much. But the thing is they can't, because if you're thinking about it, when the ground is muddy and wet, it's just like a car tire, right? Like how sometimes if you try to drive through mud, you get stuck because it just starts.
And all of a sudden, 900 chariots come to a halt because they're stuck in mud and they're slipping all over the place, and they're not an effective weapon to beat Israel.
So they can't control where they're going. Yeah. So they're getting overthrown, taken down. Right?
Yeah. And this is what's occurring. This is what Deborah says God did. So she's up on the mountain with Barak, and then it starts raining. There's an earthquake, and they're seeing that the chariots are struggling. And she says, behold, the Lord is going before us. Let's get them.
Yeah.
And they go down, and they're just waiting. It also is why Sisera runs away on foot. You'd think, man, if you had a chariot, way faster just to bolt with your chariot out of town. He doesn't. He jumps off the chariot and runs away on foot because his chariot's stuck. Yeah, it's not an effective means of transportation at this point because God brought a rain. And it talks about the torrent of Kishon. So was there some kind of a flash flood situation that happened here? This river overflowed because of an onslaught of rain. Yes. God brought about the inability of the chariots of Canaan to destroy his people.
Yeah, that's
true. Awesome, right?
It's true. It's so cool seeing how this worked because, I'm sure, obviously, you're having to think about this again. The Israelites at this time, they were probably afraid because they're looking at this. They see the 900 chariots lined up, right? But then Deborah says, "No, don't worry. We're going to be okay. This is going to be fine." And then God is with us, basically. And then you see this happen right before your eyes.
Yeah, this chaos ensues. And then, let's get them.
God's
go. With us. It's time, right?
Yeah.
They run down the mountain and they attack. It's awesome. Now, another theological aspect of this, which is just beautiful.
Yes.
The head Canaanite deity was Baal. Right? We read a lot about Baal in the Old Testament and Baal worship. Baal is the storm god, all right? He's called the rider upon the clouds in Isaiah 19. So this is interesting. They usually depict Baal as wielding a club in one hand and then this spear in the other hand that represents thunder and lightning. He's the storm god. But then all of a sudden, there's this really bad storm that ruins his people.
Yeah.
what's happening here is God is showing up Baal. God is showing
right.
that, no, actually, I'm the storm god.
Right.
I'm the god of it all. These are my people. Sorry, Baal, you weak, fake god.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't control the weather. I'm in control of the weather, and I'm going to destroy your
Right.
people with it.
Right, and you see this is so significant too because it's replicating a little bit of what happened in the Exodus, right?
Yeah.
God's basically showing, like kind of like when he showed the Egyptians, like, hey, no, I'm the God of all of these things. That's why he sent all the plagues.
Yep, I'm
It's
the god
'cause
of the
he's showing-
frogs.
Yeah,
I'm the god of the flies. I'm over, not your little gods. I'm over everything.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm the
like-
supreme god.
Yes, exactly. And so that's the same thing that he's doing here with the Canaanites. He's showing them like, no, look, I am the God of storms and I
Yep.
control everything. You should be worshiping me because I'm the real deal. That's the whole idea of this. And so,
Yep.
and then just being there for the Israelites again and repeating this pattern that we see with the judges, as we talked about in the beginning, it's just God again showing his faithfulness to the Israelites and saying, no, like, look, I'm going to be, I'm going to let you prosper through this. And like, not only that, he's just glorifying himself in the way that this battle was conducted too, by showing the Canaanites, no, I'm in charge. Not this guy.
Not this, not this false god. So it's an amazing story. So now we have a little bit more of it because Sisera, the general, runs away on foot. So he's not killed yet, even though everyone else gets killed. So what happens? Well, let's go back into Judges, and I'm going to read Judges, picking up in verse 17. All right. So here's what happens to Sisera. It says, now Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was peace between Jabin the king of Hazor and the house of Heber the Kenite. Okay, so you remember who Heber was. He's a descendant of Moses' brother-in-law, who was supposed to be the eyes for Israel. But there was peace between the Canaanites and the Kenites at this time. However, Heber remembers the commitment that his people had made to Moses.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
he probably brought up his wife and his kids to know we protect Israel at all costs, even though we have peace with the Canaanites.
Yes, that's right.
So this guy flees to an ally of Israel, but he doesn't know they're an ally of Israel. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense.
So he knows that they had peace, so he goes in. Verse 18. Jael went out to meet Sisera, and she said to him, turn aside, my master, turn aside to me. Do not be afraid. And he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him up with a rug. He said to her, please bring me a little water to drink, because I'm thirsty. So she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink. Then she covered him. He said to her, stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, is there anyone here? That you will say no. But Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg and seized a hammer in her hand and went secretly to him, and she drove the tent peg into his temple, and it went through his head into the ground, for he was sound asleep and exhausted. So he died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and said to him, come, behold, Sisera, come and I will show you the man whom you're seeking. And he entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead with the tent peg through his temple. So God subdued on that day Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the sons of Israel. The hands of the sons of Israel pressed heavier and heavier upon Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they had destroyed Jabin, the king of Canaan. What in the world is this? This is a crazy story, right?
Yeah.
So, Sisera, our technology's not working. Too much rain, flash flood, earthquake. The horses are freaking out. I can't get around. I'm sliding all over. He runs off and he goes far and he gets to this place where he thinks he has somebody who will help him.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What's interesting, you see in this passage, he says to her basically, he says, he says, if anyone comes and inquires of you, like, is there anyone here? Tell them no. Because he's like, no, I'm in hiding. I don't want people to know. I don't want to be killed.
And he thought he could trust her.
Yeah. But the thing is he didn't know that they were secretly allies.
Yeah, he didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so she's hospitable. She even goes the extra mile. He says, can you bring me some water? She brings some milk. That's better, right? There's more sustenance. There's more nutrients. No, I'm not just going to bring you water. Here's some milk.
Yeah.
I also wonder if she had a plan all along because milk makes you sleepy.
I was thinking of that too when I was reading
Right?
this. And what's interesting is you see what she's doing here, based off of the end result.
Yeah.
She's making him comfortable,
Yep.
making him lower his guard, make him think, okay, I'm safe,
Yeah.
and trust her. And then she's waits till he falls asleep. He's out,
And she knows who he is and what she's got to do. She knows about the battle. Yeah. So she personifies friendliness and consideration and kindness and assurance, right? Mm-hmm. But then she does what she was supposed to do. She does the right thing in keeping an affiliation in their ally of Israel. And she kills him with a tent peg through the... Could you imagine he's sleeping and she just, boom, drives it in? Yeah, now, this sounds gruesome, hard to imagine, pretty gross. And sometimes people ask the question, come on, like, did a woman back then have the strength to do that?
It sounds like
because she can't be like tapping on. He'd wake up. Like she's got to just one or two, boom, real quick blows, or he's going to get up and defend himself. Mm-hmm. So how did she do this? How was she strong enough to do this? Well, what's really interesting, Tyler, is that during this time, it was women's job to put up tents.
Yes, that's fascinating.
AKA, she knows how to drive a tent peg into the ground.
Yeah.
She had the muscles, the dexterity. She knew exactly how to do this.
Because that was one of her jobs. So, because women did that. And so you see, obviously, that makes sense how she would be able to drive a tent peg through his temple. And it's like, and when you read this too, this is one of those gruesome stories that you see throughout Scripture where it's like one of the more gruesome ones where it's like, but the end result, it's fascinating because through this, we also see that Deborah's prophecy came true, that he would fall to the hands of a woman.
She prophesied that Sisera would not fall into Barak's hands, but would fall into the hands of a woman. Could you imagine Barak's shock when he went into the tent and he sees Sisera lying there with a tent peg through his head because this lady killed him?
Yeah.
Just God's word is true. Deborah is a true prophet of the Lord. She said what God was going to do, and then there was proof that that's exactly what happened.
But there's more to this, though, with the prophecy of him falling to a woman, right? Because what's interesting about this is this death for Sisera was shameful because something that was interesting about this, thinking about it, he's the persecutor of Israel, right?
Yeah.
He's slain by a woman, which was a shamefully embarrassing way to die at the time because of the Canaanite culture.
Yep.
And with that, it also would disgrace him beyond his death in also disgracing the Canaanite nation, because people, the culture at the time, would look at that and say, wow, your king was so mighty, he fell to a woman?
Yeah.
At the hand of a tent, especially not just the hands of a woman, but to a tent peg. Seriously.
Not even a sword.
Think about that.
Arrow.
It doesn't matter that a woman killed him. Just the fact of how he died is embarrassing.
It is.
It's laughable. That this king, this one who called himself such a great king,
this general,
that he's asleep and he dies at the hands of a woman from a tent peg. So culturally, they're like...
In our culture, it'd be similar. Can you imagine one of the top generals of America fighting this battle, fleeing for his life, and then there's a secretary who stabs him with a pen?
Yeah, that's true.
You just be
true, you're right.
This isn't how a general died. Are you kidding me? It is extremely shameful on all of Canaan, but this was the crux of what allowed them to continue to pursue the Canaanites, because they destroyed the army, they destroyed the top general, so they were able to go all the way into Canaan to Hazar and to obliterate Jabin and what he was trying to reestablish. Yeah. And after this, God delivered Israel through Deborah, through her prophecy, through her bravery, through her calling Barak to do what he needed to do with the army. And he delivers Israel from 20 years of persecution from the Canaanites who are trying to reestablish their regime, right?
Yeah,
it's a phenomenal story. And I think we can learn a lot from Deborah. One of the things we can learn is she didn't let the spiritual deadness of her culture discourage her or impact her so that she didn't do what God called her to do. Yeah. She was a brave, bold woman who stood up, a woman of the torch, right?
Yeah,
And she ignited passion in the Israelites through her prophecy, through what she told them they needed to do. I mean, I can't imagine coming back from this war not being stoked about who God is and what he did for them, right? And she was the impetus, she was the catalyst to all of that in Israel. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and so she really was really followed the Lord's will, and like she was confident in that and trusted him to the point of like going into battle knowing that he was going to have them covered. And so it just like Robbie said, it's just seeing the person who Deborah was, and that her faith in the Lord was something she not only spoke of but she backed up with action is something that's significant.
It is, and I think like to apply it to ourselves, I hear so many people like every week bemoaning the fact that American culture is getting so anti-God. I would agree. I think it is.
Yeah.
And I really wish things could be like they used to be, and everything's going crazy. And to be honest, and I'm not trying to pick on people to be mean here, but it's often older people.
Yeah.
It's often people in Christianity who should be the mature Christians. The truth of it is, things are going to get bad, but throughout the history of God's people, there have been times where things were bad.
Yeah,
there's been times where spiritual depravity was at an all-time high. Deborah lived in that, and you don't see her sitting around complaining.
Well, I was going to say, you obviously contrast American culture with this culture that Deborah's living in.
Oh,
it's way different. Like, honestly, we're really pampered if you think about it.
Yeah,
based off the
our culture is nothing like first century Corinth.
It's
our
not.
culture is nothing like what was going on in Canaan at the time. Like, people have had it. We've had it so good in our culture that now that it is getting worse, it's like, oh man.
I mean, and it is,
but we don't understand. Like, what was going on here was crazy. If you study the Canaanites and the things that they did, we would definitely lock them up for crimes against humanity.
Yeah,
for their rituals and their religious practices.
Yeah, it's true.
But we don't want to bemoan. Yeah, things are getting bad. Who cares? No matter how bad it gets, how am I going to stand for the Lord? What has he called me to do? Because if everybody around me falls away, I can get depressed about that, or I can continue to walk with him and I can do what he's called me to do. And as evangelists and apologists, that's what we got to do. We got to be engaging in our culture no matter how bad it gets and loving people, doing what we know we're supposed to do. It's the easy way out to complain and to get discouraged.
Yeah, it's something that's really happening in Christian culture. But when you take a moment to sit down and you look at just throughout history in times of persecution and pressure that Christians and the Israelites were under back in the day, it makes you thankful for the time that we live in. Like, it makes me thankful for it.
Well, and I often think, like during my life, I'd grown up going to like, summer camp, Christian camp or mission trips. And then I went to a Christian college. And to be honest, when you're surrounded by other kids that love the Lord at camp or on a mission trip or at college, it's pretty easy in that environment to live for the Lord.
It is, yeah.
And it's a great thing. I love that time period. But you know what's really amazing is when you're surrounded by people who don't care about the Lord and you live for him anyway.
Yes.
It is a cakewalk when everyone else is doing what they're supposed to do and you're in that. But when you're not in that, what are you going to do? Who are you deep down? And are you going to be like Deborah? The woman that can ignite a revolution, that can ignite a revival back to the God of Israel?
Yeah.
Or are we going to get depressed and discouraged because everyone else is doing bad things?
Yeah, and so if you're uncomfortable with the way things are in American culture, like do something about it. And that's what I mean. Like, and I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Because the thing is, if we are those people that ignite the flame back in the culture and we bring about another revival or revolution, it starts with you, right? It starts with the individual person and how you interact with people on a day-to-day basis. It comes through those relationships, those spiritual conversations. It comes from knowing your faith, to be able to defend your faith and be confident in your faith. And then to be able to share that with other people, that's where the spark is ignited. And
we're not alone. Like, that's the thing. People think, oh, it's getting so bad. No, we have God.
Yeah.
Jesus says, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. He literally is Emmanuel. He's with us. And the God who fought for Deborah, the God who fought against the Canaanites, he's a God who fights with us, and he fights for us, and no weapon formed can prosper.
And
we can go out in confidence with that.
Yeah, and
That's
what's
who
even
we are.
what's even crazier to think about too is they didn't even have the Holy Spirit like we do today.
Yeah.
They didn't. And so it's like we have this extra tool with us. Like God is literally with us.
Peter says we've been given everything for life and godliness.
Yeah.
We're not lacking anything to live a life that God wants us to live. And that would include whatever culture we're in and how bad it gets.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think, man, I just really get inspired by Deborah. She's lighting a torch in me, thinking about how can I live for the Lord in spite of my circumstance, in spite of my culture, in spite of what's going on. What does it look like to be a follower of Christ in my day and age with the time that I have? So I just really super encouraged by her and what she did.
Yeah,
it's pretty
you're
awesome.
right.
She's
So-
definitely an unsung hero of Christianity, of the faith.
That's right. That's right. Bottom line, thank you for listening to this this podcast episode in our series with Unsung Heroes, because with people like you who are out there listening to this information and contemplating, thinking deeply about your faith, that's really important. And it's needed in our culture. Because,
and we want you to be inspired by this. And to dig into Judges, right? When was the last time you read through Judges? It's such
I was
a great
actually
book.
just talking to Robbie about this before the show. It's like I want to go back and read Judges, and after studying Deborah more, because when you see this example in a book that's not really talked about a whole lot, it's like it's incredible. And you think, like, what else are we missing out of in Scripture that, like, through characters like Deborah, through their witness and their example, the impact that they made in the culture then and still today.
It's so true.
Yeah, and so they're just just encourage you just for listening to this podcast. Thank you for listening and watching and being involved, because it's people like you that are who are studying, diving deeper into your faith, who are going to make that impact into our culture.
Yeah,
and make
we
a difference.
definitely can.
Yeah.
And hey, so before we end the show today, coffee tip time.
That's right.
We got to do a coffee tip, because this is Christ's culture
Keeping up with
and coffee, right? So the bulk of it's going to be about Christ and culture, and then a little coffee at the end or at the beginning sometimes.
That's right.
But if you've stuck with us this long and you want the coffee tip, here it is. This is a little discouraging, but it also helps us to understand what we're looking for in a good coffee shop. So when it comes to coffee beans, they're such a delicate thing that you can have somebody who goes to great lengths in how they grow them, right? You can have somebody who goes to great lengths in how they get the seed, dry them and get the seed out of the fruit, like we talked about last week.
Yes.
You can have someone who distributes them well and they roast it perfectly, right? You can have all of these steps leading up to your perfect cup of coffee. However, at the very end of the whole process, when you go to a coffee shop and there's a person making your coffee, that person can totally ruin all of the work that had been done prior, right?
It's true.
It's so sad, but it's true.
Yeah.
So here's an example we want to give you about pulling an espresso shot.
Yes.
Okay? And the importance of going to a coffee shop that knows what they're doing. So espresso needs to be a dark roast. So that's about who roasts it, what type of bean it is, right? So let's say you got the perfect dark roast. Let's say that the grind was perfect and the people who made the grinder did an exquisite job to put it on the espresso setting, and it comes out in the perfect dusty, powdery grind, which is what you need for espresso, right? So you got the roaster doing their job, you got the grinder maker doing his job, you got even the pack into the espresso machine, right? They got to pack it just right. It's got to be compressed to the specific tightness of the puck that's in there. Let's say the barista gets that right. They put it in the machine. The machine should be cleaned recently to have a perfect taste. It should have water that is, are you ready for this? 194 degrees.
Very specific.
That's the perfect temperature for espresso. 194 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you watching in Australia and Canada and the United Kingdom.
That's true.
Fahrenheit.
We gotta
194
specify that.
Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius. But let's say the machine's, everything's calibrated. So you got 194 degrees Fahrenheit. The actual pressure of the water being pressed through the perfectly ground, perfectly roasted coffee needs to be 130 pounds per square inch. PSI. Okay? So let's say all of that has gone into making your perfect cup of espresso, okay?
Yeah.
if the barista doesn't know what they're doing, they can ruin it right at the last minute. And this is so discouraging to my heart because so many people have gone into so much trouble to get me the perfect bean, the perfect cup, the perfect espresso. What happens is this: 25 seconds is the time period that you want to be pulling the espresso shot through. Because if you pull it out a little too early, your espresso is going to be weak, it's not going to have the right amount of crema on it, and it's going to taste sour. And I've had espresso like that before. Where you're like, this is not good. Something's wrong.
I made
with
espresso like that before. I'm so bad, unfortunately, at making espresso shots. Like just getting the right
discouraging, right?
Is hard for me.
It is.
I gotta watch
Get a
some
timer,
videos of practice.
25 seconds.
That's what I need to do.
That's the key.
Timer. That's
now, if your barista pulls it longer than 25 seconds, what happens is there's these oils in the beans that come out after that amount of time, and it tastes like a burnt, dark cup. Not pleasant. So the big tip of the day is go to a coffee shop that knows what they're doing. Make sure you go somewhere where they know the perfect amount of time to pull the shot, because everything prior to that can be perfect. But a barista who doesn't know what they're doing can ruin your excellent cup of coffee.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Try a lot of places, ask them if they know these things, and go to a coffee shop that has experts that are serving the coffee, pulling the shots, and know the science behind a perfect cup of coffee. Yeah. That's the tip for the day. It's a pretty good tip, right?
I think that's great. And like that's something that people probably don't know about.
Yeah,
so
sure.
It's interesting.
It's amazing how finicky coffee can be and how much can go into it. But it's also really neat how God made us creative to figure this out.
Yeah, and well, that's why there's some coffee shops that are better than others, because some really get it down. Some are close to getting it down, and then some...
Not so much.
Yeah.
But it's cool that God made us creative to, he think about it. He created this seed that he knew we would discover and we would roast and we could try all these varieties with and we can make all these different drinks with. It's really cool. It's not like an accident. Like God created it for us to discover.
It doesn't just taste good to us. It's also something that like it gives us energy.
Yeah, it gives good antioxidants. There's all these health benefits to it. But it's just a cool thing that God has allowed us the process of being creative. To make a perfect cup of coffee. That's enjoyable,
it's fun.
Right? It's super fun. So that's your coffee tip for the day, though. Go to some place that really knows what they're doing and ask a lot of questions of your baristas.
Yes, and so thank you for listening to Christ, Culture, and Coffee. But before we go really quick, again, just wanted to draw some quick attention to our sign here from our good friend Matthew. Yeah. Again, he just does such a good job. Make sure you look at his Instagram account, SE Collective, without an E. And he just, you can go through, look at some of the images of projects that he's worked on, and he can give you the perfect project completed, whether it's a table or a sign or something. Like he does a great job. So we just want to really emphasize our good friend Matthew.
Yep. Thanks so much for listening to Christ, Culture, and Coffee today. And we'll be back next week to talk about another unsung hero. We'll see you then.